Welcome to the Emerald City Sportscast.
Wilson, as he throws deep downfield. It's going to be caught by Metcalf for the touchdown.
Hosted by longtime Northwest sports journalist Dan Viennes.
Here's a drive deep to left. He has done it again. Wow. Kyle Lewis, 3 games, 3 home runs. Mariners have a 5-2 lead.
Brought to you by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. World-class audio recording right in the heart of the Woodinville Winery District.
Wide receivers to either side. Russell takes the snap, drops back. He's going to throw down the middle. He's got a man. The ball is caught.
Game over, baby.
Touchdown. The game is over. The Seahawks are going back to the Super Bowl.
And now, broadcasting live from the Dan Cave Studios, here's your host, Dan Viennes.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Emerald City Sportscast, our second go-round. I am Dan Viennes. This is the 365 Sportscast Network. We have a lot to get to today. No beating around the bush. Bill Alvstad of the Hawks Playbook podcast will be joining me because we have a few Seahawk news items to take care of, don't we? Lots going on over at VMAC this week at Seahawk headquarters. But first, let's get to headlines, shall we?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
And now, here's today's headlines, brought to you by FreeBets, the newest online sports betting comparison site. Check them out at freebets.us. All right, you guys. Thanks again to our friends over at FreeBets. They offer a balanced comparison service to help you make informed betting choices while benefiting from the best offers that are out there. Check them out at freebets.us. Front and center this week, after 3 seasons overseeing a top 10 scoring offense, and just 24 hours after head coach Pete Carroll publicly proclaimed his job was safe, Brian Schottenheimer fired by the Seattle Seahawks on Tuesday. Schottenheimer taking the fall for what was a mysterious collapse by the offense over the season's second half and an absolute no-show in their 30-20 wildcard loss at home to the Rams on Saturday. I'll have much more on the Schottenheimer dismissal, who might replace him, what it all means, coming up with Bill Alvstad. Elsewhere, the WSU Cougar football team making news this week, all of it positive. Star running back Max Borghi announced he will be returning for what he promises will be a special 2021 season. Borghi played in just 1 game in 2020 after battling a back injury, but rushed for 1,200 yards, caught 140 passes his first 2 seasons on the Palouse. He's excited about the prospect of getting more carries in Nick Rolovich's run-and-shoot offense. Borghi will still be a true junior in 2021 after everyone was allowed to carry over their eligibility from 2020. The Cougars also added an intriguing new name to the quarterback room over the weekend. Jarrett Guarantano, who is a grad transfer, started 7 games for the Tennessee Volunteers last year. The 6'4" Guantaro started 32 games during his Tennessee career, throwing for over 6,000 yards with 38 touchdowns to 17 picks. He was rated as the number 2 dual-threat quarterback in his high school recruiting class before signing with the Vols. And another quiet week for the Mariners. They did bring back lefty reliever Roenis Elias for his 3rd turn with the team. Elias will be in the mix to land a role in the revamped bullpen after signing a minor league deal with the club. So much to talk about, as I said, with not only the firing of Brian Schottenheimer as Seahawks offensive coordinator, but overshadowed by John Schneider also signing an extension to remain general manager through 2027. Pete Carroll's new deal that he signed earlier this season runs through 2025. We'll talk about what that means. Was Schneider involved in the Brian Schottenheimer decision? Let's hit a commercial break first. When we return, Bill and I will figure out how to get the Seahawks back to the Super Bowl. It's coming up next, right here on the 365 Sportscast Network. You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast. Looking for a place of inspiration to record your next musical or vocal project? Why not do it in the middle of wine country? Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio is a 4-room boutique recording studio in the heart of Woodinville Tourist District on Hollywood Hill. Within walking distance of over 100 different wine, beer, and spirit tasting rooms, this peaceful setting offers a respite from the rat race of everything around it. The studio features 14-foot ceilings throughout and a large main tracking room, along with separate isolation rooms for drum tracking and vocals. Featuring a talented crew of freelance engineers and an impressive array of industry-leading equipment, my friends at Hollywood and Vine Studios can assist with your audio tracking, mixing, and mastering pursuits. To find out more or to book a session, email Kevin at hollywood-vines.com, call 206-235-8125, or visit hollywood-vines.com. If you're like me, you love animals. I mean, you love animals. And if you're looking to add a new furry friend to your family, the best way to show your love is by supporting no-kill animal adoption centers. And the best way to do that is by checking out nokillnetwork.org. The volunteers at No Kill Network seek not only to support no-kill adoption centers, but help make a change by working with all animal shelters to change their policies and make sure every pet has the chance to find their human. And with the COVID pandemic, many of these shelters are full, and these pets need you. So check out nokillnetwork.org for a list of no-kill shelters near you, and there's even a handy adoption pet finder tool you can use to help you find your next best friend. That's nokillnetwork.org. Online gamers, have you checked out PSX Extreme? If not, you're missing out. PSX Extreme is a cutting-edge gaming website providing you with everything you need to know about the latest and greatest games. You'll find up-to-the-minute news about the gaming industry, as well as in-depth reviews of all the coolest games. The writing staff at PSX Extreme will also keep you informed on all the rumors about new games in development and impending releases. So if you can put down the controller just for a second, do yourself a favor and check out psxextreme.com.
You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast, presented by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. And now, here's Dan.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Emerald City Sportscast on the 365 Sportscast Network. And finally, I am joined by my very special guest, Bill Alvstad, co-host of the Hawks Playbook podcast with our buddy Keith Myers. And we've got a few things to talk about. Bill, how are you?
Dan, thank you for having me. Congratulations on your new show, the Emerald City Sportscast. That's awesome. I'm glad to be with you. And we're going to be talking Seahawks football, so I'm excited.
Well, I want to thank you not only for joining me, but for your patience. The Seattle area a couple of nights ago was ravaged by massive windstorms that thankfully I slept through like a brick. But we woke up, we had power, but our internet's been down for 2 days, wasn't able to do the live show yesterday, so I want to thank the listeners also for being flexible and coming back on a Thursday for this rescheduled show. But it doesn't change what's going on at VMAC. They're figuring out a way to get some things done. Is your head still kind of spinning with all the news coming out of there this week?
It was a little shocking, I'll be honest with you. Carroll indicated in his press conference on Monday that both the OC and the DC were expected to return in 2021. And 24 hours later, I happened to be clicking through my Twitter feed, and Schefter had the news that Shotty had parted ways with the Seahawks. I was just completely shocked and spent the next hour trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, I did too. And if you're like me, the first thing you do, because I saw that Schefter report, I think 3 or 4 minutes after he tweeted, and the first thing I did was check the account to see if it was fake or not.
Yeah, exactly. On our show, the Seahawks Playbook podcast, Keith and I had just finished recording our show for the week. And we saw the news, had to get back on and record an addendum, the little spot in front of the show. But, it was crazy. What did you think? I mean, I wasn't thinking they were going to make a change, and I'm actually pretty happy that they did. Schottenheimer brought some benefit to the team. The team finished pretty good this year overall as far as offensive ranks. I think 12th overall in total yards. Of course, 12 wins. Some other stats. Russell Wilson's had a pretty good run the last 3 years with Brian. But there was enough there, lack of in-game adjustments, lack of a short, quick tempo passing offense, underutilized running game that Pete Carroll likes, and a few other differences, and now he's gone.
Yeah, I was as shocked as you were, and especially because how defensive and kind of defiant Carroll sounded the day before in his season-ending meeting with reporters when asked directly about whether or not Brian Schottenheimer would be coming back. He got defensive. He actually said, "I'm offended that anyone would even think that I wouldn't bring back Schottenheimer or anyone on the staff after winning a division like we did and having the success we've had." So Carroll doesn't usually do this. He usually is a guy that when he makes a statement that emphatic, he sticks with it. And before I get to my thoughts about just the move itself, I want to get into this a little bit, because this move overshadowed another small piece of news that came out earlier in the day, that John Schneider, general manager of the Seahawks, had been extended himself for another 5 years through the 2027 draft. This deal goes beyond the extension Carroll signed earlier in the year. His runs through 2025. So for the second time now, because about 3 years ago when they both signed their extensions within a few weeks of each other, Schneider's went slightly beyond Carroll's too. And I thought at that time, okay, this is when Carroll walks away at the end of his deal. He'll be 69. Schneider's finally going to get his chance to hire his own coach and run the organization his way. That didn't happen. Carroll, and that kind of surprised us all that he got such a long extension. Now Schneider's beyond. Do you think there's any connection between that 24-hour timeline where Carroll says no changes are being made, I'm sticking with Schottenheimer, Schneider gets the support of ownership, gets the extension the next morning, and then hours later we hear that Schottenheimer has been fired?
Listen, I think Pete and John are a great team. They work together hand in hand. They're essentially married. And there's absolutely no way that these things happened in a vacuum. I'm sure that John Schneider was involved in this process. I think they probably took an extra day of evaluation. I think Pete Carroll probably woke up Monday and didn't think that he was going to be without his offensive coordinator. I thought that he would probably come together in a meeting. They would hash out some differences, some things that probably were brewing throughout the season, and came away from that meeting understanding that they weren't going to be able to come together on it. And so I do believe that Pete probably was mostly truthful in his press conference. I think that he was intending to have Brian Schottenheimer make adjustments, and he was going to try to dictate terms on those adjustments. And I think Brian probably was taken aback a little bit on that and backed away.
Yeah, it certainly would be fascinating to be a fly on the wall at VMAC during those few hours. I do think you're onto something. Pete Carroll's an emotional guy, and clearly by his tone after the game on Saturday and in the comments he made on Monday, it's still stinging from that. They just weren't expecting it. And so for him to make those comments, that could have just been from a place of pride, and as you said, maybe they reevaluated. My thoughts, I think you and I are on the same page. Brian Schottenheimer, his legacy is going to be a really difficult one to pin down, because we talk about his failings. We talk about 2018 when they were too predictable and ran to a fault. We talk about this year when they were leading the league in scoring the first 5-6 weeks and flying high and let Russ cook and all of that. When he was hired initially, a lot of people hated the hire because his reputation was boring system, lack of ingenuity in the passing game, and ran it too much. And now he gets fired because he wasn't running it enough. But yet, all 3 years he was here, the Seahawks finished in the top 10 in the league in scoring. So I'm with you. I like Brian Schottenheimer. I really do. I honestly think he would make a really good head coach. It seems like now he's not going to get that opportunity, at least not this year. But something was missing, and there was something in the way that ultimately, after a 3-year sample size, I feel like he really lacked feel on game day and the ability to adapt on the fly to what teams were doing to them and make those kind of fluid adjustments throughout a game. And, I mean, we saw 8 straight weeks of them basically trying to dictate a certain style on offense that teams were taking away from them, and they never adapted to it. And I think that ultimately was as unfailing, and it is a good thing that they had the guts to make this move because now there's an opportunity for some change.
Yeah, I agree. You know, the failings of the last 8 weeks and just his playoff record in general, with the offenses being behind in 5 straight playoff games, the dismal showing in Dallas, the dismal showing in Green Bay, and then accumulated with this almost worst possible case scenario for the Seahawks in the playoffs against the Los Angeles Rams. Just the lack of adjustments, and quite frankly, I think it really did come down to this game. Russell Wilson in 3 games versus the Rams had a 55.2% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 16 sacks, 73.6 rating. The other 14 games, nearly 70% completion percentage, 39 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 36 sacks, 109.4 quarterback rating. Brian Schottenheimer just couldn't figure out how to beat the Los Angeles Rams. And you needed to be able to have a quick passing game, quick tempo, to beat that over-the-top coverage and their aggressive front 4, and try to run the ball more effectively. And that short passing game, that quick tempo stuff just was never there. Never really been a strong suit for Russell Wilson. And that really does give us an opportunity right now to find an offensive coordinator that is really well suited to Russell Wilson, that will enhance some of the things that we are that we have shortcomings on, such as the quick passing game and converting on third downs and limiting some turnovers. All 3 things are what Pete Carroll wants Russell Wilson to be able to do. In addition, we need to be able to implement Pete's vision on the run game. Pete said the primary focus going into 2021 would be for the run game to be to run more often and more effectively. He wants to dictate more to defenses and run more effectively, and that's one of the ways to do that. And so I think that there can be a happy medium, a balance.
You do.
I think this year Russell Wilson threw like 60% passes. We only ran 40%. Chris Carson's carries were way down. Injuries was part of that. He only played in 12 games. Carlos Hyde had injury problems. They never really established that an identity on offense this year. Early on, it was the long passes and the passing game. And that went away. The Seahawks were left with empty cupboards, and Russell Wilson struggled the rest of the way. Never had an answer, and so now we turn to some other options.
Yeah, and you make a good point. A lot of people freaked out when Carroll said what he said before the move to fire Schottenheimer. When he said, and he tried to correct himself, when he said run more, and then he said run more effectively, and then he backpedaled on that again and said, no, I mean really run more. And he even acknowledged that I know fans don't want to hear this. But then I went back this morning and looked at those comments again, and when you really read the full quote, he then gets into more detail about the structure of the run game, and it isn't just about pound the football over and over again. It sounds like he doesn't want to go back to what we did in 2018. It's about how the run game is structured, so you can be run based, and you can build everything off the run game, but have the run game be less predictable, have it be a little bit more dynamic, so teams don't know what's coming at you. That's what I took out of his comments, which would lead me to believe a lot of fans are afraid that he's just going to go out and hire some lackey to just do what he wants and pound the football and become vanilla again. That's not my takeaway, and it doesn't sound like it's yours either.
That's not my takeaway either, although it could happen.
Sure.
I just don't believe that that's going to be the intention. I think when you have Russell Wilson, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, definitely a future Hall of Famer, you've got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, you've got weapons, right? The team is not void of weapons. A new offensive coordinator that comes into this team is going to be in a pretty good position. You mentioned earlier, too, I wanted to make this point with John Schneider's extension. Very happy about that. You're right. It does extend past Pete Carroll's deal. I think this one actually means that the team is looking for continuity post Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
And that's why John Schneider has the extra time there. And this points to an opportunity also for a future offensive coordinator. You're going to have an opportunity to establish yourself under Pete Carroll, and when Pete Carroll leaves, there might be an opportunity there as a head coach for the team as well. So there's a lot of things to like about this opportunity. In addition, Pete Carroll's legacy, his tenure here, success, Russell Wilson quarterback, etc. So I think that the cream of the crop is available to us.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to kind of pinpoint exactly the direction that Pete wants, but I'm absolutely positive he's really focused on his vision and the team identity, and that's going to be first and foremost in his thoughts when he picks.
And we're going to talk specifics about some of the guys that are out there and some of the guys we think would fit and some of our personal favorites. But first I want to talk about the job as a whole. And you mentioned it. There's a couple different ways to look at this. First of all, you would think that the pieces are in place for this job to be really appealing to someone who calls plays and runs the offense. You've got a future Hall of Fame quarterback. He's surrounded with weapons, some of the best young receivers in the game. We don't know about the running back group right now and how that's going to carry forward, but you know that they'll find the guys they need there. Talented tight end group. Need another body or two on the offensive line, but the pieces are there in place. I saw a quote from an analyst yesterday I thought was spot on. He said, Dwayne Brown and Brandon Shell, the best pair of tackles that Russell Wilson's had during his tenure here. So there's a lot to work with and an opportunity certainly to be successful, yet there are people who think this job isn't appealing because any candidate is going to know that Pete Carroll's going to have his hands in this and kind of dictate
That's absolutely true.
what they do. Do you think that puts the team at a disadvantage when it comes to finding a candidate?
I do, and I think that's the one drawback, okay? Let's just be honest. It's Pete Carroll's team. It's his vision, both offensively and defensively. I wish he would just stick to the defense stuff, but he wants to be able to affect the offense as well because it all ties together. Offense, defense, special teams, those are the three pillars. And he's going to be involved. So with that said, normal head coaches around the league insert themselves into certain situations or want plays called and so forth. That's typical. Mm-hmm. It just depends on how much involvement, how much you're overriding your OC, stepping on his toes a little bit, making him uncomfortable. I don't think it's quite to that level. Yeah. But you just never know with Brian Schottenheimer and the way things ended, if it was just too much in the end, or if there was just a vision and team identity issue that was there that we just probably won't even ever really understand completely. But yeah, that is going to be a concern, and those questions will be asked by any offensive coordinator interviewing for the position for sure.
Here's why I think that is a little bit overblown, because when you look around the league, there are a lot of teams, I don't know, off the top of my head, there's probably 7 or 8 I could list right now, where the head coach is an offensive mind. And the offensive coordinator on that team is offensive coordinator in name only, coordinates the offense during the week, but the play calls on game day are made by the head coach. We can look at San Francisco and the Rams for that, and Cleveland for that, and there's a bunch of other different examples of that. And so it would seem to me that this is still an appealing job because you're working for a defensive guy. And so with those pieces in place that we talked about, if you come in here, even if Pete's jumping into the mic every once in a while to tell you what he wants to do on a certain third down call, if the offense succeeds and this team makes a deep playoff run, you're going to get the credit still.
Yes, I agree. I think that you're absolutely right. I think this is especially for some of the younger offensive coordinator candidates that are out there, guys that have got coordinating experience at the college level, maybe some quarterback coach level coaching experience in the NFL, or wide receivers or offensive assistants, that sort of a thing. Those are the type of guys I think that would be a good fit in this particular situation. Established guys, I think, like Doug Peterson or maybe Anthony Lynn, former Chargers head coach.
Yeah.
Maybe those type of guys Pete might not want to have in the same room, because those guys have just been there, done it, and maybe slightly less amiable to Pete Carroll's kind of his whole vision, if you will. And so I think that it would be a great opportunity for a younger guy.
Now, this is one more thing before we get into some specific names that occurs to me is, and maybe this is me trying to talk myself into optimism this week, that Pete isn't just going to go out there and hire some guy to do his bidding, is we've seen him be adaptable before. We saw him in how he adjusted after the failings at the end of 2018. And 2019 was probably their most successful year at really finding that balance, and then it got a little out of whack this year. We've also seen him be adaptable on defense, his specialty, where he's more likely to be the most stubborn. We saw it as they kind of built this defense and in the way they've drafted and acquired players the last couple of years to adapt to what's happening in the NFC West, to be able to match up better physically with the schemes that are run in Arizona and LA and San Francisco. We even saw it this year at the halfway point. We saw him certainly working close together with Ken Norton Jr. to make changes in how they execute their scheme on game day to change what they've been doing on defense for the last 10 years, and they saw it work. And so I'm not opposed to the idea that there might be some hope that Carroll would be open to hiring a guy that may be a little bit more innovative and a little bit more kind of up to speed with modern day offenses.
Yeah, I would think the exact same way, Dan, because if I had my wish, I would allow the offensive coordinator to be completely autonomous.
Yeah,
I would go in with the initial identity, make sure somebody's got the correct vision, builds the team around the best player, Russell Wilson, and starts up front with the offensive line and builds, the running back and the wide receiver. Everything kind of works together and leave him alone.
Yeah.
Leave him alone, let him do his thing, especially if it's a guy that's really, the great fit.
You know who I think ruined that for him? I think we can point to one person and point the blame at one guy that kind of ruined Pete Carroll for us in that way, and that's Jeremy Bates. His first year offensive coordinator, because I remember there was the thing that Bates was known for is they'd go forward on 4th and 1 and he'd always throw the sideline fade. And Pete Carroll would tell us, and he was very open with us afterwards that he would ask Jeremy, "Are you sure? Are you sure about this play call? Are you sure?" And Bates would say yes, and it never worked, and I think it ruined him.
That's funny. Yeah, no, you got to be careful with that, but it is what it is, and you can't argue with the success that Pete Carroll's had and the success. We just need to get the best candidate that we possibly can, get him in the building, trust that Russell Wilson will be in sync with that, and just plow ahead.
Yeah, and before we move on from Brian Schottenheimer, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he could land another offensive coordinator job. There's plenty of them open right now. I think he's respected around the league. I think people probably recognize that he did some really good things here and that the dynamic just wasn't working between he and Carroll. He's a good coach. It just ultimately didn't fit at the end.
Yeah, he's a good coach and he's a good guy. I think he would be a good head coach candidate somewhere.
Yeah.
If not in the NFL, at the college, collegiate level. I think he's a good mentor. I think he'd be good for your younger guys. I'd like to see him obviously give another shot at some point. Absolutely.
Yeah, and his reputation for working with young quarterbacks, I could still, there were reports. This is just me kind of spitballing. There were reports that he was interested, or that he had interest for the New York Jets and their head coaching job. If they hire Robert Saleh and he doesn't bring one of his young guys from San Francisco with him, I could see him bringing Schottenheimer on as a steadying influence for a young quarterback there for sure. Now I want to move on because I asked you to put together a short list of specific guys that you're most intrigued by that you would like to see succeed Schottenheimer here in Seattle. Who you got for me?
Well, I'm going to start at the top because I've got a couple of guys. I really like Kyle Shanahan and the way that he operates at the 49ers. I really respect that. I think he's innovative. I love their run game. It's a nice balanced attack. I think they're missing a quarterback to be able to fully execute that offense. And so we've seen it kind of stagnate a little bit at times. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the actual scheme and the structure of that. And he's got a couple of guys below him, a run game coordinator, Mike McDaniel, and their 49er passing game coordinator, Mike LaFleur. He's the brother of Matt LaFleur, head coach over at Green Bay. I am leaning towards a Mike McDaniel on this list because I think that Pete is enamored with the 49er run game, some of the concepts that they use there. And he's a young guy, but he's been around Kyle Shanahan for years. And he's got Falcons offensive assistant, Browns wide receiver coach, and has worked in the Washington football team's coaching staff. And so, in addition to the run game coordinator, he does have some overall offensive experience as well as wide receivers. So he's a fairly well-rounded individual. And that name really intrigues me. Mike LaFleur as well.
Yeah.
But I believe that Mike LaFleur is probably going to end up following Solomon.
That's what it sounds like. And I do think of the two guys, with what Carroll has specifically stated he's looking for, I would think McDaniel might be the guy that would make a little more sense.
Yeah, I think so. What do you have? I'm curious as to kind of where you're at on this.
All right. Well, I'm going to go. I was going to go 3-2-1, but I'll start at 1 because, and we did not, listeners, we did not compare any notes, but I've got Mike McDaniel as my number 1 guy too. And for all the reasons you mentioned, and I think it kind of fits in with what Carroll was talking about how you structure the run game and how you make it look. And what San Francisco is so good at, and the Rams do this really well too, so do the Packers and some other teams, is they'll run the same exact play a couple of different times out of the same formation, and one time it'll be a run and the next time it'll be a pass. Or
that's correct.
It'll be a run a couple of times, but in different ways. It'll be an outside zone and it'll be an inside trap. You don't know what's coming at you. And Mike McDaniel's really at a young age. I mean, he was 22 years old when Mike Shanahan brought him on as an intern. He has a really good reputation for how he structures the run game. And you look at what San Francisco does, and you think Kyle Shanahan and all those crossing routes and
exactly.
run yards after catch. But what they are is a physical football team that likes to run the football at you, and they do it with multiple backs. And I like the way that they use. Sometimes they're forced to because they've had injury issues there. The other thing that stands out to me about McDaniel is I was digging into his background because we know Pete Carroll loves personal connections. And you mentioned he has some experience as a wide receiver coach. That experience came in 2015 and 16 in Atlanta under Dan Quinn. So Pete Carroll has an easy phone call he can make if he wants input on Mike McDaniel if Quinn hasn't already been the one to call Carroll. And so I do see him as being the best fit. He may have other opportunities that afford him maybe more autonomy. I don't know. But he has certainly seen what's happening in Seattle up close. He's seen the personnel up close. If he's intrigued by the job, I would be disappointed if they didn't at least interview him or reach out to him.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good guy. I think he's fit. I think the offense there under Kyle Shanahan would be something that would intrigue Pete Carroll from a balance standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think that if he can bring some of that Kyle Shanahan offense in addition to the run game prowess, I think that would be a great fit. Mike LaFleur, another choice. He's probably second on my list, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Just because of the Shanahan tree,
right?
In that offense, I think that he can help Russell Wilson with some of that quick tempo passing offense and crossing routes and throwing to the tight ends a little bit more, throwing to the backs out of the backfield. I think all of that was underutilized under Brian, and so I think going forward, those are going to be things that they're going to try to accentuate for Russell Wilson. Another name that I had was a name that's already been mentioned out there as being a guy that was maybe first on the list for the Seahawks as far as the interview process. Probably would be Shane Steichen.
Yeah,
the Chargers offensive coordinator, recently let go when Lynn was let go as head coach, and so he's available. He's out there. They did try to run the ball. They weren't very successful this year. They had some injuries, but in the past he's had success. And then developing, of course, Justin Hubert as a quarterback, and having some success there as well. And I think he would be a good candidate, at least to bring in, find out what he's all about, see if we, there's a connection of minds there.
Yeah, and he's a guy that honestly I'd never heard the name before. Before Mike Garafolo reported that the Seahawks were interested in him, and that report came 30 minutes after the news of Schottenheimer's firing.
That was a little interesting.
Yeah, especially because we know that when you look back at when Schottenheimer was hired, it all kind of happened pretty quickly without a lot of fanfare and without other candidates being interviewed, and so. It appears that Pete Carroll likes to make decisions quickly, and this may be something that's already sort of been in the works. Once I looked into him, though, and you did mention you don't exactly think of the Chargers attack as one that was a physical, run-first team, especially with the success Herbert had throwing the football. But I mentioned this on the reaction show I did the other night. He throws it to the running backs a lot more than the Seahawks do. And you talked about the lack of a quick passing game. I think that's an element of any offense you build around Russell Wilson that needs to be there, needs to be more prominent. I think the Chargers threw the ball to their backs 45, 50 more times last year than the Seahawks did.
Yeah, so I like was hurt quite a bit as well.
Yeah, still caught 60 balls in 10 games.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's that release valve opportunity for Russell Wilson has been missing for at least the last 8 games. That's not a couple of years. We've just never had a change of pace back, really.
Yeah.
We tried with ProSize for a number of years. Didn't work out. We've never really, McKissick was on the roster for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But we never really took advantage of the skill set that McKissick had.
Nope.
And it'd be nice to have a back that could be a complementary back to a Chris Carson type. I don't know if Chris Carson's coming back. It depends on his number. But we need kind of a Nick Chubb guy, a guy that can pound the rock, so to speak. And then a change of pace guy would be nice.
Yeah, well, we could have had Nick Chubb, but we took Rashad Penny instead. Well,
that's true. That is absolutely
that's
true.
another conversation. Who do you have as your number 2 guy?
Well, that would have been it.
Okay.
I think the Steichen pick is probably my number 2 guy. I've looked at everyone else. I think he'd be a good fit, and we'll just have to see.
Oh, that was your number 2 guy. Tell me the last guy on your wish list.
Well, and Pep, I would combine that with say Pep Hamilton, the quarterback coach from the Chargers.
Okay.
He's got some background as an offensive coordinator for Stanford, and they have a prominent run game. When he did that, he was a head coach from the DC Defenders in the XFL.
Yeah. I went back and watched. I watched some Defenders tape this morning.
You did? That's funny.
Yeah.
He was a past offensive coordinator, I think, for Indianapolis. 5-6 years ago. That's an interesting choice as well. If you were going to go internally with the Seahawks, you might look at David Snellis, Seahawks passing game coordinator. I think Russell Wilson really likes him.
He does.
So if Russell Wilson has a little bit of input on this decision, and you would think that at this stage in Russell Wilson's career, and as close as he is to Pete Carroll, that he would have a say in who would be coming on board.
Yeah.
And it may be as simple as having a guy like Dave Canales come on board as well.
I feel like Canales holds an interesting part in all of this. I feel like if he was the guy and Carroll wanted to make that move, I think that would have happened already. I think he's kind of the fallback candidate if they shoot for some of these other guys and can't get him. But I don't necessarily think that would be a bad thing. I don't think if that happens that we'll be saying, oh, they couldn't, they had to settle for Dave Canales. He has an intriguing background. But he's a total unknown. We've never seen him coordinate an offense or call plays. And I think Hamilton's interesting too. You bring him up. He was my honorable mention. I think he might be kind of the ultimate compromise candidate, if you will, that would appease much of the fan base because he's not that far removed from being sort of a hot name and a quarterback guru with the work he did with Andrew Luck and some of those things. But I was surprised to go back and look at last night. I looked at some of the stuff from when he was in Indianapolis, and it was what I expected. And the reason I thought he would appeal to Pete Carroll, because he's a David Shaw, Jim Harbaugh guy. And so you're talking about using the tight end quite a bit in the passing game, using a fullback, doing a lot of stuff from under center. He's evolved, though. When I went and looked at what, certainly what they did with the Chargers, working with Steichen and with Anthony Lynn, didn't look that way. And I don't know if you can gauge what he did in the XFL, but that was all shotgun single back stuff. And so he's interesting to me. He's appealing. He's not at the top of my list, but I think I could see why he would appeal to Carroll, certainly. A couple other names that I have on my list, I really like the idea of Nathaniel Hackett and Alex Van Pelt. These two guys have a couple things in common. As I mentioned before, they're guys who hold the title of offensive coordinator, but they do not call plays on game day for their teams. But they're also guys that have been around the league a while. They're not necessarily the super young, hot name. Hackett's 41, formerly held offensive coordinator positions with the Bills and Jags, middle of the pack as far as results there. Never really had a quarterback. With the Bills, I think he was dealing with A.J. Manuel and Kyle Orton. But he also worked for his first year in Jacksonville under Gus Bradley. So you talk about connections there. But I really like what Green Bay does. They don't necessarily, we think about the passing game there because Aaron Rodgers is about to be named MVP, I would expect. But they also have a very dynamic running game, and they really work off of that. And then Van Pelt is a guy that's kind of a blue-collar guy. He's been around for a long time. I could see personality-wise, I think he's a guy that would appeal to Carroll. And what I saw on Sunday from him in the wild card game against the Steelers with Stefanski sidelined and Van Pelt calling plays, and what the Browns did to the Steelers, not just pounding the ball and being physical and running it with Chubb and Hunt and giving you different looks, but still threw the ball effectively, and Baker Mayfield looked great too. So those are a couple guys that I'm not really seeing a lot of buzz about that I think could be great fits.
Yeah. I was going to actually ask you what you felt about some more established guys. Nathaniel Hackett was on my list. I thought that maybe Seattle would have to ask permission for a guy like that, since he is offensive coordinator. But
they may,
the difference being not actually calling the plays would be enough.
Yeah.
Of a promotion to be able to get him. Alex Van Pelt, obviously, Nick Chubb was my pick in the draft as far as the running back I wanted Seattle to take.
Mm-hmm.
And end up taking you're right. We got Penny. Being able to make that work and orchestrating that with the talent that they have is a good thing. So yeah, either one of those would be very interesting and acceptable for me, I think.
Now, what about the other side of the coin? Are there any names that pop into your head that stand out as guys that if they are announced as the next offensive coordinator, you're going to roll your eyes and just think like, oh no, here we go. Pete Carroll just did it. What are we in for? Like worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario for me would be one of the Carroll brothers. Brennan Carroll, run game coordinator, recently agreed to become the University of Arizona's offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Although I don't believe that deal is yet inked.
Even if it was, you would think for an NFL job.
Right.
Yeah, we've seen that happen before.
Right. Or Nate, the wide receiver coach, currently on the team. I just think the nepotism there would be a bad look. Those guys, especially Brennan, he may in fact be ready to have an opportunity somewhere, but I just don't think that it should be under his dad. So that would be the worst case scenario for me.
Yeah.
How about you?
I do think. Well, I think there was a missed opportunity, just bad timing. We'll talk about that in a second. To me, I think if he brought in one of these retread guys, guys like Wisenhunt comes to mind, or Mark Tressman I've heard mentioned, one of these old school guys, or Marty Morningweg, or one of these old crony guys that he's known.
How about the name Darryl Bevel?
So what
do you think about bringing Darryl Bevel back into the Seahawks organization?
Now, I thought of that, and I actually thought about that before Schottenheimer was fired. Trying to gauge people's idea of how they felt about Schottenheimer. I put a poll on Twitter after the game on Saturday. If you could only choose one for the 2021 season, who would you rather have as your offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer or bring back Darryl Bevel? And Schottenheimer still won that one, about 58% to 42%. I thought of that for a moment just because of the history. I think so much damage was done with Super Bowl 49 and the outcome there. I don't think Carroll can go down that road again. I think that's one where Schneider would step in. I don't think not that he couldn't not allow it. I don't really know exactly how that relationship works on paper, but
talk to me about your feelings on Doug Peterson.
So that was my next note. And at first I dismissed the idea. I think it might not. I think it might not work out timing wise because there's so many head coach job openings. There's reason to believe that he just kind of got a raw deal in Philly because he was handed Carson Wentz, and that didn't work. And I don't know if anyone could have fixed that. And his offense has just been ravaged by injuries for 2 straight seasons. His wide receiver room was always a mash unit, and his running back, he never really got a chance to get going.
And their offensive line was decimated. Yeah.
But if he knew today or tomorrow that he wasn't getting any head coaching interviews, if those organizations with openings had all gone too far down the road to kind of circle back to him, I had forgotten that he's from Ferndale. And he's a Seattle kid, and he's quoted as talking about his reverence for growing up watching Steve Largent and Jim Zorn and all those guys, and Cortez Kennedy and those classic Seahawk teams from the early days. And he's also a guy that his resume before he got hired by the Eagles was as coordinator in Kansas City for Andy Reid or Philadelphia for Andy Reid. And that's a situation where you don't have autonomy and you have to work in lockstep with the head coach and you're not calling all the plays on game day. And so I wouldn't completely rule it out. The unknown there is just we don't know if he and Carroll have a rapport at all or if Carroll might think that he's got a little bit.
It's an interesting name to watch.
Yeah.
I think only because of the connection. You're right, though. We don't know what the relationship is with Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's is a step ahead on some of these things, I think, and he's probably got a nice little short list already. I don't know if Dan Peterson's on that list or not, but it wouldn't be a bad thing. And maybe it's a guy that you look at down the road as well that might not be such a bad idea for a head coach, in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, the other name that's been reported by Josina Anderson, and I'm blanking on his first name now, but Elliott, offensive coordinator and running backs coach at Clemson under Dabo Swinney. Really done, that's a total unknown. I mean, the college game to the pro game. Certainly Clemson is an offense that, Trevor Lawrence and his development, and so they certainly can throw the ball at you.
That would be crazy if we brought an offensive coordinator up from college. I just would have no idea how they would perform. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we missed an opportunity to do that because I do feel like if Steve Sarkisian hadn't gotten the Texas job last week, I think I think that would have been a no-brainer. I honestly think that would have been Pete's first call. I think it would have made a ton of sense. I think it would have been a great fit. And I think ultimately Sarkisian may want to get back into the league. I feel like that would have happened, or at least been 70, 80% chance of happening if he hadn't got that job with Texas.
Yeah, interesting name. Yeah, just not sure. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be an interesting couple weeks here. I think this happens fairly quickly.
Yeah,
I don't think Seattle likes to dither on this.
No.
Want to get their act together before the combine, I think, is probably the timing on this. So we'll see. This is one of the most consequential hirings in the Pete Carroll era. You can say John Schneider was number one.
Yeah.
This might be number two, given the state of the franchise, where Russell Wilson is in his career.
Yeah.
The fact that the team is a 12-4 team. We are close, maybe a piece or two away. If you put the defense, the surging defense, comes back next year, you pair that with a nice little top five offense. This team is dangerous and can be very good and potent in the offense. We just can't seem to get over that hump. I think Brian Schottenheimer was a part of that. He's no longer with the organization. Let's see if we can find a guy that really has a great effect with Russell Wilson and marries up really well with Pete Carroll. Everyone out there that's listening that is worried about the run game and the prominence of that, Pete Carroll's got a pretty good track record. He makes things work. If he has an opportunity to pick an offensive coordinator, establish the identity, own it, and be the best at it. And I think if we own it, we're the best at it. We start up front in the trenches, look at a new center, maybe a left guard. That's an upgrade. I think the team has an opportunity to do that. Get a running back, whether that's Chris Carson or somebody that can be healthy every week and pound the ball. Seattle really has an opportunity to be a balanced, well-run, nicely lubed up machine.
Yeah.
And I'm actually looking forward to it. I really am. I think we needed a change, and sometimes change is good. And it really does kind of kickstart something new and fresh, and I think Russell Wilson will benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue that I think this is, when you talk about the rest of his career as a head coach in the NFL, the end of his legacy, this is the most important decision that Pete Carroll will have to make, I think, for the last couple of years of his stay in Seattle, because of a lot of things you mentioned. Going into this offseason, what was so frustrating about that performance against the Rams was knowing that there's no place for this roster to go to get more dynamic. There are no draft pick assets in 2021, and we're missing a first rounder in 2022. There's enough cap space to get things done with some of your own guys, but there's not enough cap space to go out and acquire a big difference-making type of player or two. So you're pretty much stuck with what you have. And so the only way to elevate that and try to evolve that and get to where you can go beyond where you went this year is to change the approach on offense. And for all those fans that are as upset as I was maybe Monday or Tuesday and think Pete Carroll's going to keep that from happening, look, Pete Carroll wants to win. He likes to win. He's pretty passionate about it. And whoever the new guy is, if he comes in early in the season, we think they're running the football too much and it's not working and they're running into a brick wall and they're getting killed and they're not winning, then he'll adapt. He just needs to find the right guy that's able to adapt, because Brian Schottenheimer clearly was not that.
Yeah. I have some hope on the salary cap. I think that right now it's listed at $178 million. I think the league is going to try to help the team with that. There's incentive on both sides to keep the cap similar to what it is, around $195 million. I think that gives Seattle a little bit more ammunition. They also have some contracts that they look like they could extend to help them with the cap situation. Diggs, Dunlap at 14.1, all that's unguaranteed. That's not going to stay that way. Dwayne Brown, considerable amount of his contract is unguaranteed. So a little restructure there. Reed, I think, has a little bit of money there to work with. So they can manufacture a little bit of money to help them. I do think that they need to upgrade their center and left guard positions to help with that new identity the team wants to establish. I think getting another possession type slot receiver, a big slot, would be an option. A guy like Josh Gordon, of course, Josh Gordon has not been available to the Seahawks, but somebody like that, and Antoine Bolden, guy that can move the sticks for you. The third down efficiency for the team was awful. I think we were at 40%, right around 27th in the league. Carroll wants that at around 45 to 47%.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you've got to establish throwing to the backs, out of the backfield, and your short passing game, increase the efficiency of the offense. Pete mentioned that in the press conference.
Yeah.
And so, really looking forward to kind of how all the pieces fit in the puzzle this year, for sure.
Yeah, me as well. And thanks for being a part of this puzzle this week. Some challenges getting this show on the air, but glad to have you. I think we covered a lot of ground. Probably could have spent another hour talking about this. Certainly we'll be refreshing our Twitter feeds over and over the next couple of days, looking for some news on this. Bill Alvstad of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. You can find that on Apple Podcasts and all the leading podcast platforms with our buddy Keith Myers as his co-host. Thanks for joining me, Bill. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
It's great to be on. Thank you, Dan.
Hang tight. I want to talk to you after we're off the air here. Thanks for listening. Again, my name is Dan Viennes. You've been listening to the Emerald City Sportscast on the new 365 Sportscast Network. Okay. So that's what happens when you set a timer and your phone goes off during a radio broadcast. Just a quick shout out here before we go off the air to showbacker Jordan Van Beek. Check out his Twitch channel at twitch.tv/GeekBeak and show him your support. Thank you for supporting this show. We'll see you next week. Until then, as always, go Seahawks, go Mariners, go Cougs.